Have you with us. I'm going to give everybody just a chance to pop on into the chat and join us before I really kick things off and get things started. But if you are hopping in, hi, welcome. Happy to see you with us. Would love to hear a little bit about you before I get into our topics this evening that we're going to cover. Just always love to start things off by learning a little bit about who is watching and joining us tonight. So please, in the comments in the chat, let me know how old your kids are, where you're from, how long you've been following NJ Mom, if you are a new follower here, or if you join us every week for our weekly live chats. Happy to have you with us if you're new or a familiar face. Lexi's a familiar face who joins us often. Glad to have you with us. So yeah, please tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how your week's going, how things are faring for you this week. I know it's been a crazy week, and we're going to get into all of that in just a little bit with our guest tonight, because there's been so much that we've all been thinking about as moms and also just as humans this past week. It's been a difficult one. So I hope we can all connect tonight and hear some great insight on dealing with these difficult conversations and heavy topics with our kids, but also for ourselves as well. But again, we'll get to that in just a few. I'm seeing a bunch of people hopping on in. So if you are just joining us, hi, welcome. Please leave a comment. Let us know a little bit about you as you come on in here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Vanessa. I host our NJ Mom TV and these weekly chats here with you on Facebook and YouTube. And we love being live with you on Tuesday nights. I love seeing all of you join us and just get into these conversations that I know have been so helpful for so many of you mamas, and also for me too. I look forward to this every week. So happy that you're here. I always also like to just start our chats by giving a moment of appreciation and thanks for all our frontline workers who continue to just carry us through such an incredibly challenging, trying time. I know that things are really difficult right now. They've been difficult for going on 11 months, which is hard to believe. So just know that you are seen and appreciated by all of us at NJ Mom, and we thank you for everything you're doing right now and have been doing. So come on in, join us. Hi, I'm seeing some more people come in. Happy to have you with us tonight. Please let us know a little bit about you in the comments, where you're from, how old your kids are, what's been your biggest parenting challenge today. Would love to hear it all. So please leave a comment and let us know as we get things kicked off. So for those of you who are new joining us tonight, this is our weekly chance to really connect with moms around New Jersey and walk through some of the challenges of parenting through this pandemic and really parenting in general as we all face this together. So if you're just joining us and this is your first time here, I hope you get a lot out of tonight's chat. It's going to be a great one. We have a fantastic guest who I think will just give really an expert point of view in talking with our kids about what's been happening this past week, the events at the Capitol, all of the fallout, all of the things related to that, but also just current events. It seems as though this past year we've just had, topic after topic after topic that we've had to discuss with our kids that have been really challenging to do so. So Vanessa's going to be with us tonight, and I'm going to bring her in just a few minutes. But before I get to that, before we dive on into that topic, get your questions ready for her. I also just do a couple things each week before we get started, just so that you guys know some of the things that we've been working on at NJ Mom and some of the new articles up on our site if you haven't had a chance to check them out. So please give these a look if you haven't. We will be dropping the links to all of these articles in the comments in the chat section. So give these a look. You'll be able to click on those links and check them out if you haven't already. For those who may be new here, we do a couple weekly series that are super popular with all of our NJ Moms. And the first one is our NJ Mompreneur of the Week. And we feature so many incredible women who are business owners and moms who are doing amazing things. And this week we have Catherine Wagner McGuire. And I loved reading about her. She has a very interesting background, and her business is Claire Story Fine Art in Montclair. And I like the way she described it because she was saying that she really set out to create an art gallery kind of with a twist. An art gallery meets mini museum meets community space. So she's done that in Montclair. She talks a little bit about the way that she has had to change things during the pandemic, which I know many of us have had to do personally and professionally. So just a great little story to read. She used to work at the Met too, which I found super interesting. So loved reading about her, and I know you mamas will as well. Another popular favorite on our site is Things to Do This Week. Kid-friendly things to do. We're all looking for it, especially right now. Winter is here, and we're looking for ways to get out of the house safely. Lots of outdoor options to share with you in this for this week, but two that I thought were really cool. There is this eco-friendly ice skating rink in Princeton, and we actually have an Instagram post up on our feed that a lot of people were going crazy for. So this is included in our article this week. Really cool to read about. I never heard of anything like this, but it's basically a synthetic form of ice. So give it a look in the article. We're going to put the link here. It's really pretty, and Princeton's just such a nice space to kind of walk around. So give that a check. And then another one that caught my attention, my kids love Daniel Tiger. There is a Daniel Tiger exhibit at Liberty Science Center. And we ran down the details that you need to know about that, all the COVID, restrictions and precautions in place there as well. So that's up for you also in Things to Do This Week. And then another article that I think would be really helpful for moms of little ones right now. Preparing your preschooler for a 21st century education. So obviously, because of COVID, a lot of the things that you would typically do to search for a preschool aren't necessarily happening. You're not really going on tours and things like that. So this was a great article kind of breaking down some things to think about, but it highlights Everbrook Academy, which is a new school opening several locations in New Jersey. They were a part of our NJ Mom Baby Expo back in November, and we got to hear a little bit about what makes them different, what makes their curriculum different, and there are lots of details in the article. So if you are looking for a place for early childhood education for your kids, definitely give this a look, because I think it'll give you a really good overview of some things and some details about it. So check that out. We love to see you hashtag NJMom in all of your pictures, so thank you. We get so many great hashtags and mentions, and we just love to see all of your kids and your smiling faces and the ways that you all are making the best of this time as best as we can. So please keep them coming. Thanks for tagging and sharing with us. We feature them a lot. And we also choose 5 cover photos of the week on Facebook. So if you're watching live on Facebook here, you can comment a pic on the post about cover photo of the week, and we choose 5. And you can always just let us know what you're thinking about and wanting to see and hear from us as well. So please keep those comments coming, both about our lives that we do here each week and all of the other things that I just mentioned on the site that we would love for you to check out. Before I get into the guest tonight, just wanted to kind of briefly give a mention as to what we're going to be discussing, because I'm seeing some people just popping in now. So hi, welcome. If you're just coming in, we're happy to have you with us here this Tuesday. My name is Marissa. I host our weekly NJ Mom Lives. And this is really just such an important ritual now for me. Every Tuesday night, I look forward to it each week. And this is our chance at NJ Mom to really connect with moms around New Jersey and have this sort of shared space to talk about and discuss and get expert advice and guest advice on some of the things we've all been faced with over this past year. So if you're new here, please let us know. Drop me a comment in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, and would love to hear a little bit about you. So please, if you're just popping in now, let us know a little bit about where you're from, where you're watching from, how old your kids are, and if you're a new follower, or you've joined us before. Okay, so while I wait for some of those comments to come in, I'm going to bring in our guest tonight. Vanessa de Jesus Guzman, and she is with Free to Be Mindful. And I'm going to bring her in and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about her and her specialty and why she's going to really help us get through what we're dealing with right now. So, Vanessa, without further ado, I'm connecting now. Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being with us. I am so excited for our moms to hear from you tonight. And you and I were talking a little bit before we got on, and I know that we've each had our own experiences, even in the last week, with talking about some of these really heavy topics with our own families. So just a reminder to all of our moms watching, we're all in this together. That's why we do this. We're all moms, and this is why we have this, because it is so important to know that we're not alone in our struggles and facing. Before we dive into all of that, I do want to give you just a chance to tell our moms a little bit about you and your background and what you specialize in and who you work with and all of that.
Yes, thank you so very much. So, as all of you, I'm a fellow NJ mom. I live and work in Hudson and Bergen County, and I am a former educator. I started my career off as a second grade teacher, so kids and working with families are my thing. And then I transitioned to becoming a school counselor. So, I work in a middle school where every day is an adventure, even through the pandemic. And I am a professional counselor and the owner of Free to Be Mindful, which is located in Richfield. I specialize in working with children and parents among issues, and with educators providing professional development, especially with a foundation on mindfulness, which I believe is so important for all of us to carry in our day-to-day, as it really helps us, especially as parents, with our own children. Personally, I am the proud mom of a 7-year-old amazing little boy, wife to a supportive husband, and I have 2 amazing parents who I am very, very grateful for as well.
Awesome. Well, you certainly have sort of a breadth of experience from really all angles in terms of working with kids. And, for parents right now, and educators, really. I mean, it's just been such an unprecedented time. And I know that we hear that word like pretty much every breath we take these days, but there's really no other way to describe it in some capacity. So I guess first, let's just start off by looking at this past week specifically, and then we'll kind of broaden it out and talk about, this past year a little bit. But over this past week, obviously with everything that happened at the Capitol, a lot of really complex, heavy conversations and topics that are something that we need to address with our families. And for moms who may not know where to start, what would be, I guess, the first thing you would tell them about how to go about these conversations and kind of how to prepare for them?
Yeah, I think the very first thing to acknowledge is that it is a really heavy topic, right? Nobody would have ever expected any of this to happen in our lifetime, and it seems like all of it is all at once. So I think the very first thing is first to acknowledge that yes, it is a lot, even for us as parents and as adults. So it's going to be a lot for our kids, regardless of their age and how they understand different things. So that acknowledgement is first. And second, I would say, just as when we're on an airplane, which most of us have not been on an airplane recently, but if we remember and think back, we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and before we take care of our kids. We have to put on our mask before we take care of others. And although that sounds selfish, especially as moms and as parents, we want to make sure that we're always putting our kids, at the forefront of every decision that we make. But it is so very important because our kids, regardless of the age, they pick up on our energy. So if we are very anxious, if we are very upset, even if we're not saying or verbalizing anything, they're going to pick up on that vibe and on our actions. So it's really important that first we keep that in mind for ourselves before we even brace any conversation looking forward.
Yeah, that's so important to remember, especially right now as moms. It can be hard to, we've talked about this a lot on our Tuesday night chats, it can be hard to think of taking care of ourselves because there's so much on our plates at the moment. But it is so important. And I just think that that is really the number one piece of advice that any mom can really get from. Let's talk about different ages and kind of how we can age appropriately talk about what happened. I know for me, like my oldest child is just under 5. My youngest is not quite 1.5. So mine are little. But depending on the age of your child, there are different conversations you may be wanting to have and may have already had this week with what children have seen and heard. So can you break down, sort of by age, maybe what the parameters should be that mom should be thinking about? How detailed do we get?
Yeah, I think the very first thing is definitely to keep it simple, especially for our littles, because we don't know how much information, even background information they have from school for those maybe who are 6, 7, 8 years old. And even as early as that, some of them are on some type of, whether it be Google Meet or Zoom, they're talking to friends, they're getting information from their teachers. And then as we grow older, they're definitely on social media and such. So for our little ones, we want to make sure that we keep it simple, and we want to be mindful of how much they're taking in, even subconsciously, so to speak. So what I mean by that is sometimes we're cooking or we're busy doing other things, and the news may be on, the TV may be on in the background. And even with my son, who's 7 in first grade, he was asking questions, and I was like, wow, he's definitely, they're like sponges. He's picking up even when I'm not aware of that. So when we speak to our littles, we want to make sure that we're keeping it simple and that we're giving them the information that they need to have in the sense of safety. If our littles look at the TV and with all the uprise and the chaos that has been on the news, especially within the last 6 days, we want to make sure that they know that they are safe, that mommy and whomever else lives in the house loves them, and that they are okay, because that's always their number one concern, that nothing happens to them and that nothing happens to their families. And they may also have questions as to what was happening. Why are people so mad? Everybody looks angry. Why are they fighting? And when my little asked me those questions, because I was kind of glued to the TV because I couldn't, just in shock, yeah, as everybody was, I kept it simple in the sense of saying, we all have disagreements sometimes and we have different points of views. And I gave them concrete examples of like, how when you get upset, when mommy says put the switch away and you're not really ready to do that. So I made it relatable for him. And then saying, well, how do we manage our conflict? What is making good choices and what is making poor choices? When you're upset, do we use our bodies or do we use our words? So we just want to make sure that they know that they are safe, that they are loved, and that they understand just the skim layer. They don't need to know a lot of the details, just a skim layer of there's a conflict and people have different points of views and what are good choices to make.
Okay, well, I think that's a great jumping off for me for my little one. I mean, he is extremely curious and asks a lot of follow-ups. And I know every child is different. So this is just my own experience. He's not often satisfied with surface level answers. He's extremely perceptive. And so I did go a little bit further in the conversation. He asked me, and I thought this was so perceptive. I mean, they did like a mock election at school. And so he knew that this was related to the election. And he said, well, are we going to have another election? Like that was something that surprised me because I didn't think he understood that deeply, really what was going on. And I don't know how deeply really, but it is a follow-up that I was, surprised by. So I guess my question is, what are some things we can do as moms to make you be a little more prepared for the curveball questions that sometimes just come out of nowhere for our kids? And when we're talking about something like this, they can sometimes be really heavy hitting questions that shock us.
Yeah, they definitely throw curveballs when we least expect it, I feel like, and then keep us on our
Right.
toes. I think the very first thing is to take a breath even before we answer and letting them know that sometimes we don't have all the answers. That's completely okay at any level because it shows our kids that we're also always learning and we don't know everything, and it's through learning in which we grow. So it's okay if we don't have all the answers, but definitely taking that breath even right before so that we can kind of digest the wow, how do you know this? And then let me see exactly what I'm going to share with him. So that's really, really important. And everything is about making it a teachable moment. I think within the keeping it simple is also figuring out how much they know and how much they don't know. And that's of any age. And since as your child, he knew a little bit more than you expected, then you fill in the gaps as you go along, as opposed to kind of over dumping too much information, which may not be developmentally appropriate for their age. And using it as a teachable moment and talking about, let's talk about the election and no, it doesn't really work that way. And you get into a little bit of social studies and of history, and they learn little by little as they go.
Something else I wanted to mention that I saw shaking my tracks because I hadn't thought about this. Something to keep in mind for little ones, especially with the news being on and things like that. Children of that age, we're seeing a lot of the same images often. And as a news anchor for 15 years, I know, like that's how it's done. Like you see those images because that's the big story right now. And so no matter what time we're clicking on the TV, we're seeing bits and pieces of everything that happened. And so for kids who are really young, they don't have the wherewithal at that age to distinguish that that was a single event and that it happened and it's done. It's not still happening and it's not happening over and over.
Yeah.
So really struck me because I hadn't even thought of that with my own kids. And we haven't had that much of it on, but just, in passing. So is that something that like as moms we should reach out and approach and mention or wait for them to ask about it? Or, what would you say to that?
I think all of us have different kids and we know our kids best. So, as you stated before, your son is very curious and you didn't expect that from him. So, it all depends as to where they are within their experience and their background knowledge, and then how much they're taking in around them. And sometimes we know that if we are with them at home, especially during this time. And sometimes if they're in school or if they're in a daycare or elsewhere, we really may have no idea. So sometimes even waiting for them to mention something, but really being attuned into their curiosity and into their questions. And if we see that they're kind of looking at things over and over, really being mindful of the questions that they're asking, then filling in those details of that only happened one time, and so that they understand that they're seeing it over and over. And again, relating it to something that they may see often. So you may say when you're watching a, Disney Junior or any type of show, you know how they show commercials, or do you know how they show like what's coming up next and they show the same scene? Always making it relatable and concrete to something that's applicable to them. And eventually they start connecting the dots.
Okay, yeah, that's a great tip. Let's move on to a little bit older children, maybe in the elementary school set, who, they're likely hearing about this, whether they're in physical school or doing virtual. They're more perceptive. They can read. They can see things. What the headline, what it says, and things like so. What are some things moms of kids those age about talking and having conversations?
Yeah, that third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, I call this whole big group like Justice League because developmentally, where they are, they look at things very black and white, but they're starting to look at that gray area and really questioning, well, what's right and what's wrong, and they're very, they stand their ground in those things, but then they start dipping into the gray. And that's where you see the wheels turning and the light bulbs going off. With this group of kids specifically, they still very much trust authority figures in their lives. So it's awesome because when they come with us with questions, they very much trust and believe in what we have to say, as opposed to upper middle school. Then they start kind of having a mind of their own. It's important for this group because they start to think abstractly, and because they do have access to a lot of different mediums, is that we're honest above all. I know sometimes we want to protect our kids and keep them in a bubble and only let them know this much, but they really know much more than we knew at their age, just because the way society is. So, I mean, my first grader knows how to, navigate Google Classroom on his own. So they all know so much more than we used to. And it's important to keep in mind that maybe the way a 12-year-old used to respond, maybe that's now the way that a 9-year-old, the information that they have and the way that they respond. So being honest with them, because they are getting the information from various sources, and really asking like what they know, and then again filling in the blanks from there, as opposed to, same as before, overwhelming them with too much information from the start.
I love that. And I will say that that's so true. I mean, some of the things my not even 5-year-old says, I'm like, are you 13? Like, like he was asking me today, this has just popped into my head. He was asking me today about Abraham Lincoln. And like he heard about it, I said, and well, why, what happened with Abraham Lincoln and what happened to him? And I was like, that was another one. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a whole conversation that like I didn't know how far into it to get because he's young, so
Yeah.
I just kind of waded my way through it. I mean, we'll have to revisit that, I think, when I'm a little more prepared. But anyway, yeah, I think that is so true, is that we forget that kids are exposed to so much now, and they surprise us with what they know and are carrying with them. Okay, so that's all really good info, and I love the Justice League analogy. I think that breaks it down really well. Then those middle schoolers and teens, things start to get so much more complex. They're debating in their own classrooms. They're talking with their friends maybe about families who feel differently than theirs or whatever it may be. So these are really complex conversations that parents of teens and preteens really are starting to have. So what do you tell your parents who are in that age group, and what would you advise about this past week and
Yeah,
conversations surrounding that?
that's so true, especially in the preteens and early teen years, because then that's where they begin to defy authority. They begin to do more risky behaviors. And that's just, part of the developmental age and those fun years that sometimes none of us want to really relive. At that point, it's definitely so much important to make sure that we listen more than we speak, because at that point they are obtaining information from all different sources, and we want to make sure that we're listening to where they're coming from, that we're really hearing them, and then not that we're saying you're wrong, we're right, and not imposing our views. And that is hard as a parent because we want to raise them into miniature versions of us sometimes. But what we really want to make sure is that they have factual information, because as they're getting their facts from TikTok and from Snapchat and from Instagram, some of them may not be factual data. But we don't want to do it in a demeaning way, because that's where sometimes we turn them off and we lose them, and then they don't want to have that conversation with us. So that's where really listening to them, seeing what they know, and then using phrases like, well, what do you think about this? Have you wondered if that? Just to make them think, because they can think so abstractly, and see what kind of thoughts they come up with, and engaging with them in almost adult conversation while keeping in mind that they can flip-flop, that they will have, sometimes radical points of views, and that's okay. And that this is all one big learning experience that they have never experienced, and neither have we. So when we don't know all the answers with any age, we can always say, well, let's look that up together. when they come to us asking, well, what does insurrection mean? Or what do all these words mean?
Yeah.
When has this happened before? We may not know. So we can say, well, let's look it up and try to go to reliable sources on the internet so that, again, everybody is managing facts and not just things off TikTok.
Yeah, that's so important. There's a lot to think about with this. One thing I did want to ask, you shared when we were talking earlier, just a personal experience with your own son that kind of caught you off guard. And I'm always just curious, as a professional, how did you handle it? And, what sort of tools did you recognize that, oh, I tell other parents to kind of keep this in their toolbox and I'm using it now. Can you kind of share that with us and a little bit about how you got through that moment?
Definitely. So, as I shared earlier on, when we were seeing everything last week, I just kept it to there's a conflict. People have different points of views, and they're using their bodies instead of their words. And what would you do instead? Instead of giving them all the answers, we want to see if they can kind of recall things that we've already taught. But just yesterday, as I had this conversation in mind, but not really paying attention to what he was doing, he comes out of left field and said, "Mommy, have you heard of this guy, Martin Luther King?" So I filled in the blanks, and he was like, "Yeah, that guy." And he has been learning it in school, from home, but in school. And then he came to me for the first time saying, "Well, they talked about white people and Black people and what was happening in the 50s and the 60s." And I truly was like, because I had not expected it. And for my 7-year-old, it's something that we talk about different opinions, but we haven't really had that conversation regarding race. And it was something where first I had to say, okay, come, let's sit down and let's have a conversation, which is a little bit easier at that age than at 12, 13, 14. And he is one to be very curious about, just learning and information. So he was really eager to learn dates, and he was born in 1920 something. He probably knows the exact date, and he was giving me everything he learned. But then I had to, as I said before, fill in the gaps as, well, what does white and Black exactly mean? And they're so concrete. And, then it was like, well, are we white? Are we Black? And I said, no, we're kind of brown. And he said, well, no, I'm kind of tan. So fighting through that conversation. And then putting it concretely as far as bringing up friends and family members who are from different cultures, trying to explain the aspect of race and ethnicity in a very basic type of way. And really telling him that no matter what color people are, and at the end I said, I don't care if somebody is purple with 3 eyeballs and 20 fingers on their 2 hands, we have to make sure that we treat everybody kindly and with respect. And then he tied it together, like when we saw somebody who has no arms, or if he's missing legs. And I said, yes, exactly. So they definitely do connect the dots, I think, a lot more than we give them credit to sometimes, and a lot more. They can throw us off of our groove or off of our feet sometimes. They definitely can surprise us. But just taking a deep breath and meeting them where they are without overloading them on info.
Yeah, I think that's like a really valuable thing to think about for us. I mean, I was saying before, like the Abraham Lincoln thing, it was the same thing. It was like, well, how detailed do I get in this? And then he was asking me, well, why was he so great? And why did some people not like him? And I'm like, oh my gosh. But I didn't want to, I tried to keep it as simple as possible, but I also didn't want to not tell the truth about it, you don't want to gloss over something that's so important. It could be that teaching moment, like you said. So I'm glad to hear that you felt the same as I did, and sort of like, out of left field. But if we're able to kind of approach that with the thought in mind that this is a moment where we can teach kindness and anti-racism and, acceptance and all of those things, and we can do that in a simple form. I think that's good to hear that we're on the right track. So I'm happy to hear that was your experience too. Want to give a second and just give everybody a chance to ask any questions for Vanessa. And if you're just coming in and joining us tonight, Hi and welcome. We're happy to have you. I see Nicole is here. Good to see you, Nicole. Happy you're with us as always. So I'm going to wait and see what questions some of our moms have tonight. But while I wait for some of those to come in, tell us, can you broaden this out a little bit and tell us maybe some instances you've seen with clients over this past year about these difficult conversations and maybe challenges they've had related to it and tips you've given them and how to kind of handle it. Any specific things that come to mind?
Yeah, I think everything that we've experienced definitely has put adults anxious levels a little bit higher. And I've
Yes.
seen a lot of the clients that I have anxiety and really deep feelings about everything that we have been experiencing, whether they be littles or even our bigs, which sometimes then turns into other diagnosable things about really feeling upset how the pandemic has hit, and going into depression and things like that. And it's, again, our kids now are dealing with so much more than we ever had to when we were kids.
Right.
So that goes with a lot of the conflict, even within families, whether it be sibling conflict or conflict with parents, just because we're living so much more on top of each other with a lot less breaks. And especially during these winter months, not having the opportunity to leave our homes as often as we would like due to the weather. So I'm hoping in the spring and in the summer that even going on walks and going to parks and things like that, that it alleviates a little bit, because there was definitely an increase, I feel, in the winter, once things got a little bit more challenging to go outside. So on top of seeing more anxiety-driven things, it often comes again from conflicts, and then from conflicts with peers on differing opinions on things that are going on. And, last week was just 6 days ago, not even a full 7 days ago just yet. But we have lived through a lot, whether the pandemic and then the election was a big hot topic, and vaccination, a big hot topic.
George Floyd this summer, there has been, it has been 84 years, as they say, but it feels like, it just feels like it's one thing after another, and it can really take a toll.
It really, really can. So really understanding, where kids are at first, how they think, and then helping them problem solve first their own opinions and their own thoughts, and then teaching them I messages so that they can relay their concerns and conflicts well with, again, siblings or family members or friends, so that they don't get stuck in one place and then they kind of mull over sometimes, and that gets them in type of deeper situations. And then another different layer is how to socialize online, as many more schools have been virtual, especially for the past month. Us are going back to hybrid, in the month of January and moving forward. So socializing, keeping up that socializing level, but then socializing appropriately versus inappropriately socializing online has been another major challenge that our kids have had to manage, that they haven't had to manage to this intensity prior to March of last year. So it's been a lot.
Absolutely. And to say the least. Nicole is just adding that her son Liam is 2.5, but she's integrating books with different races, dolls, so he plays with everyone equally. And that was something that we heard a lot about this summer, just ways to kind of start that, that exposure, that representation early, on. And I really learned a lot this summer as well with that, and ordered some really great books that were recommended and things like that. So I know that a lot of families have been having these conversations about race and equality, really since everything happened with protests and George Floyd's death earlier. But this sort of brought a whole other layer into things this week.
Yeah, and it's so important for us to realize where we are with those things as well, right? How we feel, and not letting go of that piece of judgment, which is so hard, especially when we become more attuned as to, why do we think some things and how we have been raised and by our families and by society. So it's important to acknowledge where we are with our feelings, where we are of understanding privilege and what we carry in some senses and what we don't carry, and not only in the sense of race, but in the sense of class, ability, gender. And once we start to get more of a clear picture on that, then we can have these honest conversations with our kids a little bit more easily, regardless of what backgrounds we're from. I think all of us have to have these conversations because hopefully they're having these conversations in our schools, and our kids, once they know better, they can do better than, we're doing currently, so that the world is better in the future.
Let's hope so, right? Especially after this year. This is just sort of, I don't know if this exists, but I know that you're so in tune to mindfulness and really its power and its place. Are there any sort of like mindful affirmations that we can be doing with our kids right now related to current events, like related to like the chaos that's happening and the pandemic and the capital situation, all of these things? Any affirmations that we should be thinking about maybe related to that?
Yeah, I love pairing affirmations with intentions, and I do them myself in the mornings, but you can have these types of conversations anytime with kids. And especially if your kid maybe needs to work on something a little bit more, or if you continue working on something as they go along. And what I mean by that is if they're, for example, a little bit impatient, maybe within the family or any type of situation, you can say, let's practice today. I am patient, not I am going to be, not I hope I will be, but making it in the present. And again, tying it to something that they want to work towards, or remember when this happened. Now let's practice. I am patient. I am kind. I am accepting of others. Again, whatever you think they need to work on or whatever you want your kids to be. And not simply repeating it without anything attached, but attaching it again to something that they have been through and attaching it to an emotion so that it makes it more real for them and why that's important. So I think any characteristic that you want your child to work on, regardless of age, all of us want our kids to be kind, to be respectful, to be patient, to be trustworthy, to be fair with others and accepting of others. And that's something that, you can do hopefully when we go back to school, on our way to school, on our way to the supermarket. And if you do it for yourself and do it with your child, that also makes it a bonding moment, which is so very special. And those are really the moments that they'll remember, as they grow.
So true. I love that. Nicole had a great suggestion. Check out Chatty Snaps. They are affirmation buttons that are for kids. Have you heard of those before,
I have
Vanessa?
not. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And she also mentioned that she and her husband are nurses. So having two nurses as parents, we take care of everyone, no matter what or where they come from. And that's a great, that sort of is on the heels of what you said. That's a great way to tie it back into the family and the personal and something that they know. That's a good way to explain it to him. So you have to look at, where you're coming from within your own family and look at ways that you are being an example for your kids. And then they're able to kind of see that in a concrete way. So that's a great point, Nicole.
Yeah, and it's really simple for us to kind of keep these conversations top of mind when they're happening currently, when they're happening in the right now. I think the challenge that hopefully we remember to kind of remember as we move forward after this is how can we continue to implement this as we move forward, as we look onto brighter days, as this kind of becomes something that happens. Yeah, we have to remember, how are we going to be more patient with others? What did we remember during the time of the pandemic when all the racial things came up? What did we learn about other people and other people's, the way that they walk through life because of things that have happened? We really have to make sure that we remember all of these learning lessons and then that we continue to implement them and continue to talk about them with our kids, because it doesn't happen on just Martin Luther King Day, or it doesn't happen on just like, oh, March. Yeah, that's when the pandemic happened. We really should carry it out throughout our lives.
Yeah, that's so true. Ragavi says, very well said. I'm glad you feel that way. And I just think you offered so many amazing takeaways, Vanessa, just for us moms to think about with all of this. Before I wrap this up, I just want to give everybody a chance who's just coming in, to ask any questions of Vanessa as we talk about having hard conversations with our kids about current events. It's been a really difficult week. It's been a really difficult year, and there are so many layers to all of these things we've been experiencing collectively, very serious ones. So if you have a question or maybe a specific instance where your child's brought up something and you weren't quite sure how to answer it, please drop a comment and let us know, and Vanessa can kind of help walk you through a little bit of that. While I wait for any last questions, Vanessa, can you share some parting words and kind of just some words of encouragement for moms watching tonight? You know, some things to think about moving forward.
Yeah, I remember when I was pregnant, which now seems so long ago because my son is 7. My OB told me, you know, pregnancy is such a big thing in your life, but when you really think about it, it's only 9 months. You know, it's huge, but it's only this much amount of time. And I equate that to the situation that we're going through now. And I know it's not the same, but we have experienced so much. We as adults, our families, our children, and it's huge. And it's going to be interesting moving 2021, 2022, when we look back and say, wow, that was hard, you know, and that was big, but hopefully it's just one little bit of time. So I hope that we keep that in perspective, because sometimes, you know, I like to think like the nights are long and the days are short, right? Or the days are long, nights are short.
Yeah.
We look at it, where sometimes we feel stuck, and when there's so much going on at once in the news and in our lives and in our minds, that we really want to keep in perspective that it really will be okay. And we have to believe that it'll be okay, but that there's work to be done within our own mental space, within our kids, within our own homes, and society as a whole. And we can do that, but we also have to remember to have grace and compassion for ourselves, because it's a lot. It's a short amount of time. It's almost a year, but it is a lot that we're going through. So giving ourselves grace, giving ourselves the space to, if we made mistakes, to even tell our kids like, well, mommy was kind of mad when she, you know, blew up a little while ago, and this is what I felt, and this is maybe what I should have done instead. And also that grace to our children too. Of course, we want to let them know right from wrong, but also understanding that they're growing up in a really challenging time for right now. And sometimes they need that compassion just as we do. So I think that's the most important thing to take away, and to really provide yourself the space to disconnect. I know we're always on our phone in front of a screen of some type, and giving ourselves to disconnect and really enjoying the time with our kids while they're still babies, regardless of their age. You know, they could be 18 and still be our babies, because again, you know, this is only a small time in life, and then we move forward. And before we know it, in 10 years, we don't want to look at, you know, backwards and say, oh, I should have done this, or I wish I should have done that. We really want to make sure that we soak in now, you know, everything that's happening now, the good, bad, the ugly. Soak it in, give yourself time to disconnect and space to live as needed, and move forward with, you know, knowing better and doing better.
Yeah, that's so true. So many great things to keep in mind. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I really appreciate you being with us tonight, and I know that your voice and your calming presence and, you know, all of these things that you shared will really help moms as they're walking through this and continue to walk through this crazy time. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye. All right. So glad Vanessa could join us tonight. I know that you all got a lot out of that. So thank you for being here, and thanks for being here with her and with us tonight. Please let us know who you would like to hear from and what you would like to talk about in these Tuesday night. We'd love to tackle different topics. We've covered so much at this point, everything from heavy topics like this to light fun things. So what do you in your parenting journey at the moment, momming journey at the moment? Let us know. We'd love to hear what you guys want to hear about, and what you're thinking about what this week looks like. So let us know if you have any suggestions for guests or for topics for these. Also would love if you took our quick poll on njmom.com. We do a poll each week, one question typically, just about what we're going to talk about for these NJ Mom nights. So please answer that know where and just kind of learn a little bit about what you're thinking about and feel. So please do that for us also. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us, and we will see you back here next